Welcome to the November board meeting. If everybody please stand for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, the board met in executive session beforehand for some legal and personnel issues. Board members who are not present had other personal obligations this evening. Correspondence? Secretary, correspondence?
I have none, just to remind everybody that next 2-3 weeks is the board organization meeting. Just as a matter of thought, it's the 50th anniversary of the board ever organizing itself. It was first organized in December of 1968. So
to celebrate that.
I remember the meeting. No, I was actually starting the middle school in the brand new Owen J. Roberts Middle School during that.
Chuck's bringing a 50th anniversary cake if anybody wants to come.
I will. That'll be good.
Fabulous.
He'll count the points, so. IU report?
So the intermediate unit meets this coming Wednesday. They meet after our board meeting. So I will have an update at the work session for this month's meeting.
Okay. And we're early this month by a week. Let's see, legislative report. Mary's not here this evening, so we'll get caught up again in 3 weeks. Student council reports. Who do we have here tonight? Charlestown Elementary. You guys want to come to the podium there?
Hello, my name is Julia Cook, the Charlestown Student Council President. We are so excited to be here tonight to share about the wonderful things we are doing at Charlestown. Thank you to the board and Dr. Speaker Polubinski for having us. First, I'm going to talk about a very exciting fundraiser, the BK 5K. The BK 5K is both a 5K run and kids fun run created by Bob Kelly. Bob Kelly is a parent of a student in our building. The BK 5K helps the Child Life's Activity Center at Nemours A.I. DuPont Hospital. Last year, this event raised $25,000, which will be used to make a new playroom in the sensory space of the hospital. This race lasts about 3 hours. The kids' race starts at 9 a.m. and the adult race starts at 9:15 a.m. The actual race was Saturday, September 29, 2018. The race is on the East Goshen Park Trail and will run 3 laps. The kid race has Philadelphia's favorite mascots cheering them on. There are also themed activities throughout the race with confetti, bubbles, superheroes, and more. This year, Charlestown is trying to raise money to help the BK 5K run next year.
Hi, my name is Jackson Malconian, and I am the Student Council Vice President. The Great Valley Homecoming Parade was a very exciting experience for us. We were invited to participate in the Disney-themed event. Our council voted on the movie Inside Out. Everyone was running around and talking and listening to the parade. The Charlestown Student Council was walking through the streets and waving and holding their Inside Out posters. It was truly a great night for all the people there.
Hi, my name is Danny Gardner. I am the treasurer of Student Council. In the months of September and early October, we held student council elections. We were all excited for this since 4th grade. We had to advertise our campaign and prepare speeches. This gave us skills we might need in middle school and farther in life, like solving real life problems. Also, it helped us feel like our ideas are being heard and that they matter. It gave us a look into politics and how hard it is to win an election. The day of the speeches, we were excited and nervous. We all thought we might lose and thought about what would happen if we win. We were all telling our friends to vote for us. We all anticipated our names coming over the announcements. It was a great experience. .
Good evening. My name is Matthew Belmer, and I am the Student Council Secretary. This year, our school has introduced a new tradition to Charlestown. This new tradition is the Student of the Month. Each month, a new student is recommended by their teacher or a staff member for this exceptional recognition. Teachers are working for students who are going above and beyond their expectations and showing all the pillars of character. The Student of the Month encourages kids to work hard and to stay focused. Thank you so much for inviting us to a school board meeting tonight. We would like to share 2 additional remarks. This week, we would like to thank all the educators who help us grow academically, emotionally, and socially. We would also like to thank all the veterans for their courage, bravery, and dedication to the safety and well-being of our country. We hope you enjoyed what we shared. Thank you again, and good night.
All right. Thank you, guys. I'm going to have the high school rep tell you what's going on in the high school before you leave. Actually, we have a couple awards to give out, so if you guys could just stay seated for a few minutes, it'd be great. So what's going on in the high school? Top that one.
Although homecoming felt like a long time ago now, I haven't been able to update you since then. So in summary, the homecoming was a huge success. Many clubs and organizations were able to raise money with the first ever basket auction that we had at the Friday night football game. And I think Student Council has decided to continue that tradition in the future because of how good it was for the clubs. Also, the participation in homecoming activities was very high. The most people attended the dance in about 10 years. And the football game, I was told, had the highest turnout in Great Valley history. Yeah. More recently, the first marking period is coming to an end, and so are many of the fall sports and activities. The fall show, Peter and the Starcatcher, was really good, and I think a lot of people enjoyed that a lot. And some of the sports teams had some very amazing seasons, which we'll be recognizing in a minute, seems like. And later this month, the high school will have its fall instrumental concert, so we look forward to that coming up.
All right, thank you. See, they're having as much fun as you guys do in elementary school. All right, real quick, we have some recognitions to do tonight. So who's up first? We have the cross-country team, boys cross-country team, and then the girls field hockey team.
Did you want to speak? If you want to speak. I'm the head coach of the boys cross country team. My name is Paul Gring. I've been a coach there for 37 years now. Still coaching after having retired from 36 years of teaching. This is Seth Hoffritz and Rahman Muhammad. These are our 2 captains from our squad this year. We had a squad of 39 boys. You can see, as you can see, we were the American Division champs. Boys did a great job this year. The team this year was truly a true team, a cohesiveness in our ability to run well. Regardless of how large the meets were, these guys, while not having a runner that was up there in the top 10 in a race, let's say as large as districts, where there's like 380 finishers, we could finish everybody within like 30 seconds of each other. So where both these young men qualified for states and finished in the top 40, everybody else was coming boom, boom, boom from our team, not very far behind. And we actually just missed going to states as a team, finished 7th, and they only take 6 out of the 56 teams in District 1 in AAA. So it's a very good year. These guys had a great time. They did a great job this year. So it's been.
Hi, I'm Maddie Craig, and I'm the head field hockey coach. This is my second year as head coach, and these are our captains this year, Shannon Beston and Mackenzie Hilditch. We had a really great season. We finished 15-7, which is a better record than we had last year, 15-8. We made it to states for the second year in a row, and this year we won the Chesapeake American. And I just think that the reason that we did is we truly work together as a team. I don't think you can earn those or get those accomplishments without working together, and I think that's a huge lesson for these girls to walk away with is what you can accomplish when you work together as a unit. And I was blessed to work with the best team and the best girls the past 3 years, so I'm very lucky for the team that we have, and I know these girls will go off and do great things.
All right. Congratulations to you guys again. If anybody wants to grab their parents and leave now, they're welcome to, or you can stay for all the excitement of a regular board meeting.
Thank you.
All right, next thing on the agenda is our superintendent's report.
Yes, Dr. O'Toole will be presenting on the PSSA presentation. The PSSA is the Pennsylvania State System of Assessment, and it is the standardized assessment results as well as a comparative analysis to the MAP testing, which is a test that we give as well. So predicted scores versus actual scores, and a follow-up with the assessments that are done at the high school with the PSAT, and then the percentage of students who also do SAT and ACT. So thank you so much, Dr. O'Toole.
Thank you, Mr. Lindgren. As Dr. Speaker Polovinsky shared, tonight I'm going to share with you information of our PSSA scores, as well as then comparisons of projections from NWEA's MAP, and then lastly share a little bit of information around the PSAT and answer your questions. So just as an overview and as a reminder around the PSSA is a criterion reference assessment, which basically our students are measured to part of Chapter 4, the requirements of the state to meet the state's expectations of the standards. And so students are assessed yearly in grades 3 to 8, and the keystones at the high school, but grades 3 to 8 in reading and math, as well as science in grades 4 and 8. Tonight, I am going to share with you only the data that comes from the PSSA and not including what's called the Pssa, which is the Pennsylvania Alternate System of Assessment for students who need a alternate assessment based on IEPs, and there are about six different criteria that students need to take the Pssa. This is only including the PSSA because the PSSA and the MAP that are correlated are what we wanted to share with you versus the Pssa that includes that is not correlated to the NWEA MAP. Also, just as a reminder, in 2015, the cut scores for the PSSA were changed by the state, and then in 2018, last year's PSSA, the state did condense the test from having so many sections. The actual number of sections for ELA or English Language Arts went from 4 to 3, In math, it went from 3 to 2, and science remained with 2 sections. However, the number of questions that were on the assessment were reduced, and that was primarily due to parents and families and school districts sharing the amount of time students were taking to actually be assessed. According to the state, the statistical analysis that was done and the development of the test did not intend to change any outcomes per se, but that was just a change last year to the assessment. So I'm going to share with you again the PSSA scores, and we've done a comparison from 2015 to 2018, and that these numbers are reflected from the state's metric system called E-metric. And so it would potentially include students who were tested in Great Valley, but may not reflect, as we start to transition, the state is transitioning to a new reporting system called the Future Ready Index. So it's possible that when that system is released, some of the numbers may be different, primarily because students who enroll after October 1st are not considered full-year academic students by the state, and so there's a potential that the numbers you see tonight could look a little different than what gets reported by the state through the Future Ready Index, but this is just reflecting the students that were assessed in Great Valley last year, as well as in the years prior to in 2015. So in case there are differences in percentages, there's not an intent to share any inaccurate information. It's just sometimes the metric systems are a little different. So starting off first with the math and reading for each of the grades in 3 to 8, this chart just shares with you from 2015 to 2018. Each chart I will share will have the math and reading scores with each of the 4 levels of proficiency that are possible. So starting in essence at the bottom and working our way up. Both advanced and proficient, as a reminder, are considered proficiency. So when you see the bottom where it says total proficient, it is just simply adding the 2 rows at the bottom of advanced and proficient. And although the state has used the word advanced to designate a category, advanced simply means it's not advanced content. It's advanced in the sense of having a certain number of questions answered correctly on the assessment. So it is still grade level content that students are being assessed on. It's just how many, their overall score, their overall raw score on the assessment. So you see here, for the most part, what we've noticed with our students in grade 3 from 2015 to 2018 is we see some consistency with the students in both reading and math. And see the overall percentage of proficient across the district has remained relatively constant. Every so often, as we always look at this data, the challenge is there are different students being assessed in each of the grade levels. So even though we're looking at third graders in 2018 are now obviously 4th graders, and from 2015, there are different students being assessed. So we're looking at the overall performance, but at the same point in time, there are different students taking the assessment. So what I will show you later on in the presentation is more of a comparison of how the 2018 students, their projections per NWEA's map, and how our students performed overall compared to what was not only projected by map, but then how students actually performed.
Sure. So is there a correlation from the same students going through the grades? Like the 3rd graders in 2015 were 4th graders, right, in 16 and 5th graders. So do we see similar scores, or did scores bounce around because it's just totally different, or?
Well, we are able
As
to
you
do-
said, and how much does a test change, which reflects?
Right.
So there's constant moving variables is, I guess, the answer to that question.
There are, and what we do is we are able to start having conversations at the building level around matched cohort comparisons, and that's becoming much more possible for our building administrators to look at one year to the next. We also have to take into consideration there are some factors in some sometimes in students' lives that change, as well as even for schools that have factors that have changed or caused, just to put out there, distress or potentially impacting how students approach the test. Last year, we did have an incident at our middle school, so that was during the time of PSSA testing, so those types of things also can have an impact as we start to compare one thing to another.
I have a question on this one too, and maybe I'll get, to me I understand that in the math, the proficiency is pretty much the same from 2017 to 2018, but the advanced piece dropped off by about 10%. Is that, you see those kinds of movements over the years, or is there anything, do you look at that and say, well, what did we do differently that year, or?
Well, we obviously do look at it and have conversations as to what could have taken place with regards to how students performed on the assessment, as well as looking at the cut scores, as looking at what were the variables between how many percentage correct did you need to score on the assessment to become advanced versus proficient, and sometimes students are right on the edge of scoring a few more correct to be advanced. So we typically will look at that to determine how students are performing.
If I remember correctly from past years too, the definition of advanced changes also year to year at times? The cut scores?
The cut scores can change, yes. And then also it's as the state is then looking at how many correct could be on the assessment could also shift from one year to the
Right,
next.
so it's hard to compare year to year because, like I said, there's too many factors that change that we don't control to really have a definitive, clear-cut definition, but
Right,
it's
to be
still a
able to
barometer.
pinpoint exactly, and
Right.
the students are different, so to be able to pinpoint exactly one thing that may have changed, what we do look for are trends. So if we were starting to see that, and I'll show you in a couple of slides some trends that we are looking at and paying close attention to, but sometimes when we see the number of students 10% in a class of 300, so we're looking at, but some of those students, how they performed the previous year and how they moved through. This is the first time that they've taken the test, and so there are all those variables that we have to look at, and some buildings have those, we have cross-building conversations as well with the principals.
And as we talk with other districts, as Dr. O'Toole had mentioned at the beginning, an adjustment was made in the length of the test because of feedback that was received that too much time was taken away from instruction for assessment. So a change that was made at the state level was to minimize the time. The only way to minimize the time is to decrease the number of problems, decrease the number of questions. So when then that impacts the cut score of where the line would be for number of correct. So as those variables change, it changes outcomes. So in order for us to use this as a feed-forward informational piece, we have to dig deeper into what exactly were there areas that students answered incorrectly, so we can look at those eligible content or those content-specific. Are there patterns that we need to instruct more deeply on? Are there areas that we're doing a really great job on, and what are those areas, and how can we replicate those instructional practices? So that's the work oftentimes that Dr. O'Toole will lead with. The teams in the building, principals have been great with that as well.
Does the distribution of proficiency as sort of delineated by the test match our assessment of children's proficiency roughly year over year?
That's what we see with the map.
When I show the comparison, you'll be able to see more so the proficiency versus non-proficiency that we're able to share from looking at the MAP assessment. That gives us a projection as to how students, when they took the MAP in 2017 in the fall, where were they projected to be when they took the PSSA? And you'll have a chance to, I'll be able to share that information with you.
Is that ever tied back to report card performance as well?
Report card performance is not.
And I'm talking
it's-
in the general, not student by student, but just
in
a
general,
distribution.
typically not so much in the sense that as students are performing in class assessments, also given opportunities to demonstrate what they know at that point in time. There isn't always a direct correlation between report cards and student performance on assessments, and report cards in and of themselves are another topic of conversation we're happy to have.
Stephen, question. So the PSSA is really not valuable to us. Well, no, wait, how do I want to frame this? So we're taking the PSSA because it's mandated, not because this is valuable information for us to be able to use to educate our kids. Because if if the context is forever changing under lots of different scenarios, how valuable really is what comes out of it?
I think that's a great question, and oftentimes assessments such as the PSSA are considered rear view mirror assessments because we administer the assessment in April, sometimes March, depending on the year, and then we get the results back in the summer, and then the teachers and the administrators are then able to start really diving deeply into it once the analytics, the analytical systems that the state has provide us with much more depth. We're looking at it then in October and November, and the students have had now months of opportunity to not only continue learning, but over the summer, and then they come into school. That's why we, in 2008, adopted the MAP assessment, because we wanted to have something in place that was more real time, to be able to look at students in that moment, not just how they performed in March of the previous year, where they're now in another grade level. And so the PSSA, what it does provide us with, it is mandatory by the state for us to administer to students, is to really take a look at how our system, in some respects, we can examine how our system's approaching the standards and the eligible content, because not every standard can be measured, nor is it measured. For example, we have reading, writing, speaking, and listening, but we don't measure speaking and listening on the PSSA. So there are a number of standards that are not addressed in the PSSA, and oftentimes the best way and most efficient and cost-effective way for the state to assess students is through multiple choice, with a few open-ended and text-dependent analysis responses. However, the majority of the test is a multiple choice assessment. So that is another aspect to how we are assessing students, and how we monitor their progress isn't always as well reflected in a PSSA. So we have to look at, and we've talked about this for years, not only at the board level, but at the building level, around multiple pieces of data. That when we're looking at a picture of not only our school district and not only our students, the PSSA is just one piece in time. It's taking a picture in that moment of that student sitting for the assessment, but we have to look broader. And when we make decisions for the education of students, we don't solely make educational decisions based on how the student performed on this assessment if there are other measures that demonstrate the child's proficiency in areas that maybe are not assessed on this as well. So it gives us a picture, but it's one picture to a larger piece. But we do take it seriously, and we also want to make sure that for us, knowing that as, and we know many families, as they're looking at Great Valley to move into, see this as the element of what our school district's all about. So we do take it seriously and look at the information that it provides.
Do you see much, I mean, this is obviously all of our students from 4 schools, or 1 middle school, aggregated. Do you see disparity between the elementary schools?
We do see variations in the data.
Or does it bounce around a lot?
And it'll be interesting as we see this year, because we've had the district has realigned, so that may shift. But there are elements where we do see how students perform in one school to another, in one grade level within a district or within a school to another, and so those are always things that we take a look at and have conversations, not only from the building perspective, but also in the classroom. Teachers are talking to each other as they look at their own data to determine how well can they analyze the information and make changes if need be, or celebrate the successes that they've seen in their class. So moving on to 4th grade, we do again see some similar patterns as Samantha, you shared, looking at some of the advanced levels in math, as well as looking at some in reading. Again, every year is different, but as we look at in reading in 2018, for our 4th grade, there was a difference in comparison years. Again, as we look at the data in much more detail, we can get more granular in the sense of eligible content. I shared earlier, on the one earlier slide, the state identifies a series of what they call eligible content and say this content may appear on the PSSA, but we don't know to how much or at what depth all of it will appear, but we then are able to at least examine how our students are approaching those topics and things to that effect, and we're able to then look at the data to identify if there are certain eligible content or anchors that need to be focused on each year, and that's something that will take place for both math and reading in all grade levels, but in areas where we see potential decreases to kind of take a deeper dive into that. Fifth grade, as I shared earlier, is sort of where we're seeing trends. Unfortunately, we're seeing trends in fifth grade math that are not trends we particularly would like to see. We'd like to see an opposite trend as we see here within our proficiency, and that's something that we want to spend some more time examining and having the conversations with our administrators as well as with our staff as to how we're approaching the math and preparation for the content that they may see on the PSSA, as well as their preparation within the classes.
Is there any belief that there could be an impact because of the change in math curriculum that happened? I don't remember how long was that?
Well, we started
years ago?
It was actually, I believe, 2015 was when we started the math in focus. So I don't necessarily, when we've had conversations across other districts are having used math in focus as well, and have seen a reverse trend that we're seeing. So I don't necessarily think it's the curricular piece. No, it's a great question, and those are things that's what we use the data to examine, whether or not there's aspects within our curriculum, whether or not there are instructional implementation aspects that we have to consider of our curriculum, whether or not there are resources to examine students' approach to the math. And what you'll see later is what the NWEA map projected and what actually was the actual percentage of proficiency was fairly close to this. So it's another factor is different groups of students and how they're approaching the assessment. So that's another variable that we have to take into consideration. But something that we've noticed, and we're having conversations and beginning those conversations with teams, grade level teams, and looking at student performance in that capacity. At the middle school, again, seeing fluctuations in both reading and math. We seeing more in 2018, and particularly in the reading area, as more of an outlier for sixth grade reading. Again, seeing relative consistency within math at sixth grade, but having that outlier in the year 2018 for the sixth grade reading, and drilling down and having conversations about that. Seventh grade, again, it's in comparison to one year to another, we're just looking at trends, seeing some fluctuations, but still having consistency in how students are performing. If we even looked at reading 2015 to 2018, the approximately 4 percentage point difference really isn't that significant in the grand scheme of things as we look at how students are performing. So we're still seeing some solid numbers in the sense of how students are performing from one year to another. Eighth grade, seeing upward trends in both areas. Again, looking at how they're performing. Again, if going back to 2015 to 2018, having a few years of variation, but scoring relatively consistently from year to year.
A question on eighth grade, we might have the same question. They're going up in eighth grade in math, but why seems a fairly big drop off from seventh to eighth grade in the number of kids proficient? What happens?
In seventh and eighth from seventh to eighth?
Yes.
Well,
like the numbers are in the 50, 51, right. 59, 62, 61, and in the earlier grades, it's all in the 70s.
Right. Typically, what we've noticed primarily is that a student who was proficient in seventh grade, and if often is the case, and this happens in fifth grade as well, often can score exactly the same percentage correct on the assessment, but have a lower percentage or a lower proficiency. So I'm making this number up. I don't know if this is accurate, but if I scored a 65% or 70% accuracy in 7th grade, that was proficient, but in 8th grade, that may be basic. So it's how the test scores are compiled by the state and the cut scores that they.
Well, I mean, are other districts seeing a similar drop?
Oftentimes in 8th grade, we do see many of the districts across the county that are seeing decreases in 8th grade, yes.
One of the big variables for 8th grade is our students begin to take, for example, Algebra 2 or Algebra or Geometry. Many of our 8th grade students, a portion of our 8th grade students will take the Keystone exam in math. The PSSA is a different assessment than the Keystone exam. So our students will be taking courses aligned to the Keystone exam and do very, very well on the Keystone exam because it's much more algebraic. The PSSA is much more of a 5-prong overall math assessment. So our students do really well in the areas in which they're studying and learning. They're not taking 8th grade math. Many of our students in 8th grade are not taking an 8th grade math course because they've matriculated, and many of them are taking an algebra or an algebra 2 and a geometry. So that is oftentimes, and that's across at least the county. Some other schools, they don't take the Keystone in 8th grade. They'll wait until those children are in high school. But many of our students do take algebra in 8th grade and do very well.
This slide actually specifically addressing what Dr. Speaker Polovinsky shared about 8th grade does not include the 8th grade purposefully because many of our 8th grade students did not take the map. Hearing from not only at the school level, but from students and parents, if students are taking algebra or geometry, taking the map, which does have a breadth of math concepts, we have had students taking the CDT, which is focused more around algebra to prepare them as they take the Keystone. So we have close to about 150 students that did not take the fall map. And to compare the PSSA scores and the actuals to the projections would be a little bit misleading because not every student, about 150 students less, took the assessments or took the map, and those were the students that were in the advanced level math courses. So we did not include those, but what you do see here is the difference obviously between the two charts. Some of them are off by 0.1%. They should be identical, but based on rounding and such to that effect, you'll notice that they are a little bit different on this chart and the next. But what this shares is the map test produces a score called the RIT score, the Roush unit, and that RIT score is based on a continuum of math concepts. And so based on that RIT score, NWEA has done their own correlation study to determine the probability of a student to be proficient or not to be proficient on the PSSA based on other districts from the state providing their test scores to NWEA and their own statistical team then doing a correlation study and then saying, this is the probability, or this would be the probability that your students would be proficient or not. And so what you're seeing is the NWEA projections from the fall of 2017. So our students last year who were taking the map in the fall and how they were projected to score on the PSSA in the spring of 2018. So you can see there, for the most part, particularly in 3rd and 4th grade, it was relatively close in the sense, but in 5th, 6th, and 7th, we see that our students actually overperformed what they were projected to perform when they took the PSSA. So our students were demonstrating that they, through the map, that they may not reach a certain level of proficiency when the entire group actually exceeded that on the PSSA. Looking at reading, we did have the students in 8th grade, the majority of the students in 8th grade take the map, so we are able to do that comparison, and you can see in reading. Again, this is a little bit closer for many of the grade levels of how many were projected, and you can see in 7th and 8th grade we were we missed the expectation or the projection by 4.9 percentage points for 7th grade and about 1.4 for 8th grade. So, but for the most part, the other grades were projected to be relatively close to where they were. So as we continue to use the MAP assessment to guide our projections and our instruction, we can have some confidence to know that at least we're not completely off base from where the students are projected to be on the PSSA, and can work to increase their level of understanding within the strands that the NWA MAP produces for us. A couple more slides. Science, traditionally, we've seen very strong scores within science, and both for 4th and 8th grade, we saw the same this past year in 2018. So our 4th grade science scores are here for both 4th grade here and 8th grade. And again, we've also consistently seen, which I attribute to this, the work of our science teachers as students are taking the biology keystone exam. We have very strong scores on that as students go into high school and take the biology exam in comparison to the rest of the state. And then the last slide is just to share, I know there are questions around the PSAT, and I've had a chance to sort of investigate and ask a couple more questions from our high school team. So right now, currently, all of our students, the district does pay for all of our students in grades 10 and 11 to take the PSAT. From that, approximately 80% of our students take the SAT. In the past, before the district paid, we did have 9th graders take the PSAT on the weekend. It was offered on a Saturday before the district paid for the PSAT to be administered, and approximately 60% of our students, when it was offered on a Saturday, participated in that. And we did have 9th graders.
In which grade? 9th or 10th? Sorry.
I'm sorry.
60% in 9th?
60% of the students of the juniors, when we offered it on a Saturday and the parents paid, 60% of the juniors opted to take the PSAT. And in that group, 9th graders, 1 or 2 9th graders would sign up for the PSAT on the weekend. We have had a few requests, and the guidance office does work with any 9th graders who do request to take the PSAT now. When we offer it on a Wednesday in school, parents typically pay for that. Right now, for the students, as they take the PSAT, many students are also, as you notice, 50% of the graduating class of 2018 took the ACT. And the guidance office is really having students be very discriminate in how they are approaching the standardized assessments for college applications. Oftentimes, students will perform better on one over another. And so they want the students to focus on the standardized assessment that will best offer them the opportunity when they apply to college. And since all the colleges and universities will accept either the SAT or ACT, they're encouraging students to try both and to take the one that will best support them as they look to applying for college. So about 50% of the students do take the ACT as well in lieu of the SAT.
Steve, do you know how many don't take either? Because that's hard. I mean, that could be the same, right? Of the 80%.
Yes, it could be. It could be combined.
Like what percent, or at least what percent take at least one of them?
I don't know that.
But, I mean, you look at the percent of kids who go on to college,
You hope
right?
it'll
So
be-
it's well over 90% more than likely to take one or the other.
Well, there are some universities now that are not requiring any assessments. So there are students who are choosing not to take any of the assessments because they can do test optional applications.
Right, but I mean, there are some, but I mean, in general, though, most kids are applying to more than one school. And, you know, given our record of kids going on to college, right, I would imagine it's somewhere in the 90s,
Yeah.
or low 90s. If
I can
not
find that information out as to.
Yeah.
Now, specifically for the National Merit Finalist opportunity, I did talk to Mr. Harvey, the department chair for the guidance department, and he said there are 3 ways that they communicate. A letter goes home to all 10th and 11th grade students to inform them of the PSAT, the families, that the PSAT is an opportunity for their students to practice for the SAT. In that letter, that includes information about the National Merit Finalist opportunity, as well as then a school messenger prior to the assessment is sent out to families to inform them again that their child would be taking the PSAT and that it does afford them the opportunity to be considered for a National Merit Finalist. And then lastly, Mr. Harvey shared that it's during the 10th grade, sophomore, and junior meetings that take place, as well as during the morning announcements it shared about the opportunity. What he did share with me is it's about 1% approximately based on the selection index. About 1% of the state is then, the top scores from the state are then selected for the National Merit Finalists. What I was not aware of until he informed me about the selection index, typically what they will do is double the in essence, the reading portion of the PSAT. So for example, if this student scored a 700 on the PSAT for reading, they will take the first two numbers, so 70, the first two digits, and double that to about 140. And then the math portion will be added, the first two digits, and that's what comes out to be the selection index. So if in that example, 140, and the student scored a 600 on the math, then the student has a selection index of 200. Typically, what he shared was in the past, the numbers between 215 to 218, but it changes, he said, every so often, every year based on the population of students who take the PSAT. So to be selected as a National Merit Finalist, it's based on a selection index. So the stronger the score is in essence, the English section of the PSAT, the better opportunity a student would have in reaching that selection index. So those are some of the information he shared. He did share with me that the guidance department and the administration and shared with me are exploring what's called the pre-ACT, which is in essence the comparison to the PSAT, to allow 10th graders the opportunity to practice the ACT and determine which track in essence of standardized test is best suitable to the student. The one part of that, though, is the National Merit Finalist is not a component of the pre-ACT. Only the PSAT is a component for the National Merit Finalist. However, what he did share in the last piece is that a student can use their ACT to validate if they must take the PSAT to be considered for National Merit Finalist, but they do not have to take the SAT, and they can use the ACT scores to validate their PSAT score. If I need to re-clarify, I think that was probably just as enlightening as Chuck's presentation about the budgets.
I just have a couple of questions. And a comment. So that they, as a parent who's just been through this, besides having this pre-ACT, which sounds like it could be very interesting, I think it's through the PTO that there is a test offered on a Saturday through Kaplan where I think it's $10, where any student can come in and take a practice SAT or a practice ACT, and that's how many kids, at least that I'm aware of, do get exposure to both and decide which one they want to take. So we have something, but it's on a Saturday.
Right.
And then the second thing was a question. If a student does well in the 10th grade PSAT, which is not the one that counts for National Merit, if the meetings, I don't know when the 10th grade meetings fall, if they fall after that, is there any discussion just for awareness of, hey, you did really well in the PSAT and you're close, and if you could be a National Merit Scholar, so maybe you want to study a little bit or something. Because some parents are aware of that and others not, and are we making them aware if there's a child who's looking pretty good after that 10th grade that they could, potentially, with a little bit of help, make it to National Merit?
I don't know exactly if conversations have, I can look into that question, that's a great question. I know for sure that what Mr. Harvey shared is that they will talk with students as to whether or not to maintain on taking the PSAT again and then the SAT. Yeah. Because if that's a test that they are responding well to and performing well on, then they will advise to take the SAT. He did share a story of a student who performed very well on the ACT and chose not to continue to pursue the SAT because of her strength on the ACT and knew that was she wanted to maintain, particularly because knowing that once she applied to certain universities, she would have to have all test scores submitted for a college application and didn't want to underperform on the SAT as much as she performed on the ACT.
Yeah, I understand that, but everybody takes the PSAT again in 11th grade. So if someone's doing well in a 10th grade PSAT, you would want to encourage them, even if they're never going to take the real SAT.
Absolutely.
To do, because we did have less National Merit Scholars than many other schools around here this year. Not that that's any necessary reflection, but you wonder if other schools are doing a little bit more to sort of encourage kids towards that. I don't know the answer, but I'd like us to see do as much as we can.
I can definitely ask to find out.
Okay, Samantha, what are we concerned about something? Are we hearing that maybe our guidance isn't guiding the kids through hey, you could, put a little more effort in and be a national merit scholar? I'm a little confused as to.
I think she was just trying to drive the point that there's opportunities out there and we should make sure our kids, their parents are aware of them.
Yeah, and we've had great, great history with the National Merit Scholars, and it seemed to go down this year. It could just be a fluke, but when you look around at other schools, you wonder, are they doing things are there opportunities that we're not taking advantage of, really? That's all.
I got it, thank you. I was just gonna say, if
a
we
lot
were
of scholarship
concerned
money.
about something, we could have Chip come in, but if we're not concerned about it, then we're good. And this is very enlightening, Stephen. I know, I've been doing this for a lot of years. It's confusing, but it's very enlightening the way you're connecting the dots so that we're actually seeing how everything goes full circle and what's valuable to us and what isn't. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that's it. Any other questions?
Thank you, Dr. O'Toole.
You're welcome.
I believe next on our agenda is the calendar committee update. As I promised, I would be discussing each month, giving you an update on the process. And I want to thank Ms. Blake for facilitating that committee meeting. And our committee meeting was held on November 2nd. The committee information was gathered to discuss those items which would be decision-making points. And information was given as to which days we would not have school, as well as the areas that we would be considering, starting before, starting after Labor Day, different holidays that are observed, national holidays that are observed, school code, the school code dictation of which days you are not able to have school, as well as historical information that was shared of conference times and when those are scheduled and how those are scheduled. So that meeting was held on November 2nd. The information from that meeting was coordinated, put together to develop survey questions. So through back and forth with committee members, the survey is being finalized, and that will be distributed to the staff and families. That will go out by the end of this week and then be open through November 23rd. When the calendar committee reconvenes, the next meeting is November 26th. They'll look at the survey data and will identify common themes and preferences. That information will be used to create a preview for the board, as well as a draft calendar to be presented to the board for the board to make a decision by January. So the idea, if I remember from last year when we had multiple drafts, the idea was to make as informed a draft, a singular draft as possible, present that and have a discussion for the board to vote on in January. On our website, under the district news and highlights, there is a recap of what I had just shared with the calendar committee studying preferences. And when you look there, it gives the background as well as the timeline, and a request for parents and staff to look for the survey so that we can get as much feedback as possible. The more people who participate in the survey, the more comprehensive and in-depth our information will be to provide the recommendation. So more to come on that. Also on the page on our website is the list of members of that calendar committee. Again, this is an ad hoc committee, meaning we meet for the purpose of calendar, and then the committee will be dissolved. We will not plan to have a calendar committee every year. I believe what we're trying to do is set some practices and some standards of behavior so that we don't continually have the same conversation year after year, and we can have some rules of the road for calendar. So not only dictating what the 1920 calendar is going to look like, but have some parameters so folks can plan out, so we can put some strategic processes in place moving forward. So more to come on the calendar. As Mr. Linderman gets the next piece ready, as we discussed last week, we are doing, and this is only for the purposes of exploration, to provide an informed consideration for the potential to implement a full-day kindergarten for the 1920 school year. Again, in answering two questions, why? And that's what we want to find out. Is this, starting with tonight's presentation of financially and as far as logistically, is this feasible to implement for the 1920 school year? So this will be the first of multiple presentations as we move forward with exploring this issue.
Okay. So we're going to go through a pretty high-level version of the overview of cost and facilities impact that we've done. I'm going to say we'll first review the cost for the facilities impacts. And just want to go over a couple assumptions here that we used when calculating all of this. For facilities, we assumed the assumptions are based on the current year enrollment and trends, so current trends. We're going to be using, you're going to see us talk about trends for charter school students, you're going to see us talk about trends for non-public school students, and our own current trends. The assumption is that our full-day kindergarten care, that's what Warwick provides all day for students who are either in the morning or afternoon and choose to stay in a daycare type environment in each school, would be eliminated. We've assumed the blending of the Great Beginnings into the new full-day model for costing purposes. And we are assuming we would only use spaces that were specifically designed for kindergarten use. They were, when we built the buildings back in the late 90s and early 2000s, there were a number of rooms that were specifically designed just for kindergarten. And we have an assumption of a 26% increase in our kindergarten population based on our cohort survival method kind of backwards, knowing that we every year get 26% more students in first grade than we have in kindergarten. They are coming from various and sundry private school placements or parochial school placements or charter school placements. So,
Chuck, just a clarifying question. When you talk about eliminating Warwick for the full day kindergarten care, you do not mean eliminating Warwick for the before and after school care?
No, they would stay. So for facilities, currently we have 10, district-wide, we have 10 classrooms are being used for kindergarten for both 10 different facilities, or classroom facilities in the schools, both for Great Beginnings and for the regular half-day program that we have. The projected need for full day, if full-day kindergarten were to implement for next year, would be that we would need 14 classrooms. Right now, we currently use 10 classrooms, and we currently are using 4 classrooms, one in each building, 4 kindergarten identified classrooms, as our full-day kindergarten room. Just to kind of clarify what Amy brought up, the Warwick would not be, would still continue to have a presence in a before and after school care environment. It's the way things started out in 91 or 92 when the daycare was originally implemented. It wasn't until about 10 years later that the full day version of it came into play, and still what we have today. So the proposed number of classrooms needed, and this would be assuming the numbers that we talked about, the 26% increase, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the charter school increase. That's actually a little higher, but the 26% includes the charter school too. We would need about 14 classrooms to stay within our class size guidelines. And the reason that we don't need that many more is right now you have Great Beginnings classes that vary in size from 8, 9, 12. And they would blend out into the rooms, and services that are needed for those would be utilized on a push in, pull out basis, whatever is needed. And we also would have the availability to utilize the Warwick classroom. They would actually go back to where they were when we started the daycare, kind of they normally ran the before and after school out of the cafeteria or a gymnasium type room where they would come in and that's where they would go.
For clarification, Chuck, when you're listing the kindergarten care room, you're talking about Warwick.
I am talking
Okay.
about Warwick.
Just for everyone's clarification.
And the total classrooms that are designed for kindergarten per school are, Charlestown has 3 designed for kindergarten. Katie Markley actually has 6. General Wayne has 4. Sugartown has 4. So we have a total of 17 designed kindergarten spaces. Now, some of them aren't being used for kindergarten. They're being used for IU programs, things like that. But this is what we have designed in our buildings. Let's talk a little bit about financial assumptions now. So space-wise, you have the room. We're not evicting anyone out of there. You know, essentially, it's a tit for tat with, you have 4 classrooms that are being used for the full-day kindergarten care. And whether you go full-day kindergarten or not, you're still going to use 14 classrooms next year, 10 for kindergarten, 4 for Warwick. Or if you go full-day kindergarten, you use 14 for kindergarten, none for Warwick. So essentially, it's from our angle in facilities, it is a push. There are certain other sundry needs that weren't factored into these costs. These students would eat lunch and things like that. That would actually generate revenue for us. But I'll remind people, I know there's some panic on some of the principals and some of the people in the schools right now is, oh my God, how are we going to fit everybody in lunch? I know Chris and I had this conversation. He was assistant principal at Markley. We had 830 kids here. Now, some of them were kindergartners, but the cafeteria was the same size as it is today, and we didn't use anything else other than where they are. So it's just a scheduling model. It's really just a little bit of taking time. But General Wayne, we had 900 6th, 7th, and 8th graders eating lunch there in 1999, 2000. So I'm pretty sure we can get, an extra 60 or 75 little guys in there. And we wouldn't get to 900, huh? Guys and gals. Guys and dolls, yeah. That could be a musical. So anyway, let's get into the financial assumptions. Cost for additional staff, we're using a number just under about south of $150,000 a staff member. That would be an all-inclusive number with benefits and pension and all that stuff rolled in. Teacher aides, there's going to be some costs because while we would eliminate certain aides in the Great Beginnings program, we would have additional aid needs for the program. Right now, the charter school cost per pupil is just under $16,000 a person, and we're assuming around 75–80% of the charter school students would come back to Great Valley, and we know that because the cohort is a little bit different right now, and I'm going to show you that in a chart. But right now, we have more kindergartners in charter school than any other grade level by far. We have 76 total charter school students. 18 of them are kindergarten. The trend tells us that 2, maybe 3 of them will go to first grade in charter school. The other 15 will come to us. And that's pretty typical. It's actually higher in schools that have done this, like the Phoenixville and the Westchester. They've gotten a very similar model number, but a lot more. And I'm going to show you what that trend has been looking like over the past couple of years. So the 26% increase in the kindergarten population based on our cohort survival, and I was excited to hear Stephen talk about a cohort. So we sort of talk the same language. But the cohort is how many students in that cohort, that kindergarten, move to first grade, and typically for us, that's been in the 126, 127% range, depending on number of students. And that's because we're picking up students. Parents are choosing to put their students in a different type kindergarten setting, either at one of our parochial schools or a charter school, or some of the private schools that we don't even bus to, because quite frankly, if you just look at what we bus to, you would be missing a bunch of the kids that come here. It's a lot of the Malvern School, the Goddard School, the Chesterbrook Academy. Those are profit-making entities that we do not bus to. They're not but schools we are told we have to bus to. Again, the blending in the Great Beginnings model into the full day, into the new full day model. We looked hard at this, and I made Mike. We had Mike. I didn't make Mike. Nobody makes Mike. I asked Mike. And we looked at the busing model, and we don't really see an impact in busing because we currently do have busing allowance right now. They ride in the morning, they ride in the afternoon. The ones that stay all day, ride in the morning, ride in the afternoon. There will be, we also have.
So we have that many of them that stay at Warwick?
We have quite a few that stay in Warwick, depending on the schools.
I mean, quick math, right? There's 300 in a grade, so you got 150 a bus in and 150 a bus home, right? So wouldn't you need 300 in and 300 out?
Well, none of
So
our
how many
buses at any of our elementaries, and Charlestown being the smallest number of buses, is 6 buses there? 8 buses. So most of our buses are outfitted to between 60 and 64 kids. So even if you uploaded 8 more kids on every bus, on both morning and afternoon, we don't see, unless they are all piled into one area, then it's just a matter of rerouting. The total number of buses will stay the same. There may, if you're riding with you know, your neighbor 2 blocks down, maybe that changes next year, but the bus numbers will, or the bus total numbers would stay the same. And there could actually be some savings in some of the private school busing, because we have some schools where there may be only kindergarten going to those schools. But we did not assume any savings for busing, but we did know that the busing should be a push at worst. So what we calculated for the additional cost for the additional staff members is about $541,000. That would just be if only our students went there. Savings from charter schools would be about $236,000. I will tell you that when we gave you these numbers a couple years ago, or was it last year? I think it was 2 years ago. It might have been last year, 2 years ago. It was significantly less, because we now have seen a pretty dramatic increase in charter school kindergartners. Additional costs for the non-public students, it's about $144,000 or 1 staff member. So if we could do that, we would probably only need 1 more staff member because of the way they all fall. The additional number of students we're projecting to have from pickup from charter, non-public, parochial, it's about 57 students. So it's about $450,000 net cost. Last time we talked about this, it was $1 million. And that's going to continue to come down. Here's our charter school enrollment for the
Can I just
past.
ask a question on the cost thing? And this is probably pretty out there, but I know we have an update on academics in a future meeting. But is there any cost savings that we know of from other districts of if students go to full day kindergarten, they're getting more education earlier on, does that end up saving costs on remedial learning later?
Again, we're going to talk about that at additional,
Okay.
further out meetings, but there's all kinds of things that it really relies on how it's, and I think Regina and the teaching and learning staff will deal with that in a
Okay, I just
future
wondered if there
month.
could be a cost impact even of some of that.
Well,
So-
some of the costs could be reduction in identified special ed students because they're being dealt with earlier, being kind of brought into the system earlier. There's some things that we're not factoring into the costs because we don't want to over-assume or under-assume anything. So this is the chart showing the charter school enrollment. You can see we had a pretty big, we've been growing. We were down, and I will tell you, if you go back past before 2014, 15, it hovers around 2 or 3 students forever. It's just recently it started growing, 5, 8, we are now at 18 kindergarten students in charter schools now. What does that do? The next chart, and so we're just projecting out on a very conservative number that's going to continue to grow.
Why is there such a big jump, though? I mean, why is there such a jump between the projected from now to, is this 2018, 2019, the actual number right now?
Yes.
Okay, so it was a big jump this year.
There was a big jump this year, and a big jump last year. I mean, percentage-wise, last year's jump was 60%. This year's jump is 100 and some percent.
And our colleagues, not only across the county, but across the Commonwealth, my colleagues, and it's not unexpected that once a family chooses to start their child it's typically the reason for full-day programming. Charter schools are considered public schools, so they're free to the parent. But once you're in a school, whichever that school is, you oftentimes create, that becomes your social group and your family, and that child becomes a part of that environment. So typically, once a child starts in a school, for whatever reason, they typically stay in that school. So the exponential likelihood that the children will stay in whatever school they start is relatively high.
So just to get on to the numbers there, so the 283,878 number, that would be a real number for this year if assuming no one else moves in and sends their child to kindergarten and charter school. And that's not our total charter school cost. That's going to be closer to 1.6 million. I think I shared that with you a little bit before. And you can see just using the increase in the enrollment, it does not even factor in the potential increase in tuition to them. I will also add that currently, all of the kindergartners at charter schools are identified regular education. So $15,771 becomes $40,000 if they are identified, or if we would happen to get one that would come with a special ed component to it. Wouldn't matter what the component of special ed is. It could just be a 2-day-a-week some kind of therapy that's what we would consider minor. They would get the full boat, because naturally the ones that do have the extreme needs get sent back to us because they cost more.
And I think to just clarify, it's not a charter school choice to do that, it's legislation. So the legislation requires the school district to pay a cost per pupil, and there's a fixed rate for cost per pupil regular education. There's a fixed rate based upon our school's cost per pupil for special education, and that's what we pay. So it's, because of the funding model in Pennsylvania and the legislation around charter school payments, there's oftentimes an animosity or a tension, but it's certainly not that the charter schools are dictating the cost. It is part of the formula, and that's how much you pay. So once a child is identified as a child with a disability, the cost per pupil is $40,000. If they're a child that's in regular education, a child without a disability in Great Valley School District, the cost per pupil is the lower cost, which, as Chuck said, is $15,771.
Does the charter school deem the child in need of special education?
They are also obligated by Child Find and IDEA, which means if you have a child that demonstrates or is thought to be exceptional, you have a requirement to put the child through a process, a pre-referral process, to identify whether or not they may need additional services. And if so, then you have an obligation to offer the parent a permission to evaluate and go through the process.
Is the rate of children with special needs at charter schools in line with the rate of children with special needs at Great Valley?
It's very difficult to do that analysis.
I can get you those numbers, only based on what we pay for there, I can tell you. I don't want to guess, but I know our total is 15 or 17% special ed. My guess is it's higher, not including kindergarten, but once they get past kindergarten and into the upper grades, there was a push for charter schools to basically have most of their students identified because they could get the additional revenue from the public schools.
You don't need to go chase it down for me, it was just a curiosity.
No,
The challenge, especially for younger children, many children are eligible and then receive minimal services such as speech and language therapy. It's not unlikely that a younger child would have an articulation need and then therefore receive services. So as Chuck had said, there's no differentiation between level of support needed. So if it's speech and language therapy 1 time a week, that child is then billed at $40,000. And that's where it can become incredibly costly.
Okay, so long-term, I mean, there is an immediate financial cost for adding full-day kindergarten. We said it's just under $450K is our estimate for next year. I mean, recent increases in the charter school enrollment also have a cost. I mean, so when you look at next year's numbers, our tuition rate will go up. If the number of kids go up, that could be an impact to it too. You know, we have our cost for kindergarten in charter schools in the past 5 years has increased tenfold. 2014-15, if you go back to that, we were 26,000, and this year will be 280,000. So I'm not saying that's, you know, past performance is not indicative of future or past whatever, but and over time, the savings from a reduced charter school enrollment may offset the cost of full day. And in some of our neighboring districts who have their own local charter schools that are in their district, you know, and they have quite a few more people, the Avongroves, the Phoenixvilles, the Westchesters, even Downingtown, who, you know, tends to send a lot to Collegium. You know, there's a real cost benefit for them. So,
are you saying, have any other districts implemented full day and seen a reduction in their charter school?
yeah, Phoenixville and Westchester,
They
definitely.
have.
They actually, it was a moneymaker for them. Not a moneymaker, it was a money saver for them.
Yeah, because predominantly those districts have the charter schools sitting right in the middle of the district, so it's much easier to see a gain, because that's why that was kind of the hook to get you into the charter schools. We got full-day kindergarten, and then once they get you in, like she said, then they stay.
I would see with Phoenixville, my guess is, just a pure numbers guess, is you'd only need about 50 kindergarten kids, maybe 40, and you'd break even. And they had more going to Renaissance and the likes. So it wouldn't take long for us to get to that number. We are just not near that number now because there is no Great Valley Charter School, you know, or Collegium, which is in Downingtown. Westchester was in Westchester, Downingtown, or a Renaissance, which is Phoenixville, or an Avongrove Charter School, which is. Downingtown still doesn't have one. No, I know, but you know, they're looking at it because it's a definite cost for them.
Westchester, Jim Scanlon provided me the information. Their charter school enrollment declined by 168 students, which was a cost savings of $2.3 million. So that was after 1 year.
What's that? They're a much larger district than us.
Absolutely.
What's that?
Absolutely.
Is that, you said down 200 and how many?
168 students.
Okay. Do you know how many?
168 less students went to charter schools than from previous years in their school. So I don't know the percentage of those students.
And we're about a third their size. So, you know, we don't have 168 charter school students. We have 76, of which 18 are kindergarten. That number in itself kind of should stick out a little bit to you. It's a little disjointed because it's not 76, and it's when we got 13 grade levels and there's 5 in each grade level.
That was 168 kindergartners.
I know.
Not across the board, so.
Well, they have many more charter schools.
Right.
They're still spending millions of dollars on their charter schools.
All right,
So, one more question. So the total number, our annual expense to charter schools and the like right now, what does it come out to be?
Oh, it'll be over 1.5 million, probably 1.6 million this year.
Charter school?
Charter school, for total charter school.
Yes.
For all grades.
All grades.
And it's disproportionately higher than the kindergarten because there's, you know, out of the 56 kids other than kindergarten, a good number of those are special ed identified at $40,000 a pop instead of $15,771.
So then basically, just going by the math, whether there's any other savings that could be that actually comes about, if we were to keep all our kids it would cost us 25% of what we're already paying a year for full-day kindergarten, is basically the way the math breaks down, right?
If you save them all across all.
Yes, yes. No, but I'm just, I'm just trying to put this in my mind. So I think that the socioeconomics piece is an integral part of this also, because in Phoenixville Area School District, you have many, many more two-parent working families where childcare is a problem. I would have loved, because I was a working parent, I would have loved to have full-day kindergarten. I would have saved a lot of money had we had a district with full-day kindergarten. But I think that the socioeconomics here is a lot different than it is in Downingtown and Westchester and Phoenixville area. I don't think we have as many working parents, so I don't know how much of a value that would be. And I'm just talking out loud.
I couldn't make that comment because
No, I
I
know.
would argue that we probably do have as many.
I think that's what the whole purpose of
Right,
this
and I'm
process is
just
to
talking,
understand.
yeah, and I'm just
Yeah.
talking out loud, but the facts that you're bringing definitely is creating, in my mind anyway, a lot of dialogue, so.
Yeah, and some of the other
It's
things that
very
happen that
good.
we know for a fact that some students register for our schools and then do not come at all to, or go to any school because they lack midday busing. We lost a few kids that were going to come to our schools this year. They just don't show up, don't come up in third day enrollment. They come up in our third day enrollment drop numbers. Not a lot, but a handful. Because quite frankly, as I look at the numbers from private schools and what progresses from like St. Pat's, from just using them as a number, from kindergarten to first grade, their number doesn't go from 50 down to 20 in first grade. And that's probably not 50 is high, that would be. Their number doesn't go from 20 down to 10. Their number goes from 20 to 18. And as I look across the board, there's a couple other places. We know for a fact from looking at where we're getting the kids from, a good number of them are coming from the Malvern School, the Goddard School, the ones that we don't have records on. We know for a fact that students are sitting at home this year because they didn't have the wherewithal to do a noontime bus or a noontime pickup or have daycare at all. So they're home doing that. And that's stuff we'll get into later.
Absolutely, and as we talk programming,
It's just a free editorial
and
from your business manager.
when Dr. O'Toole and Mrs. Beck and when Ms. Blake works on with the forum, I really think we need to, definitely the considerations of why parents make those choices is one strand of information in the conversation piece. From the perspective of educational benefit, that's definitely where we will be talking about programmatically what the benefit would be and what it would look like. And as I said last week, what I really would not want us to even consider or even have a conversation, this is not making a half-day program all day. That's not at all what a motivation would be for that. It would have to look entirely different, and it would be for the benefit of creating a trajectory for children so they are now able to read to learn by third grade. Very clearly setting that target, which means the conversation would not only deal with kindergarten, it would deal with expectations in first grade for 2021 and deal with expectations in second grade for 21-22, so that by 22-23, those full-day kindergartners would have a different experience entering into third grade. So although we're going to get into it at a later time, it speaks to Samantha's question about would we realize cost savings there, or would there be other instances? We'd be doing a lift, purposeful lift across expectations by the time those children got to third grade. So we definitely want to consider the alternatives and the rationale for parents, but the rationale for the district has got to be increased efficiencies and increased expectations. And it's all about educational programming.
And I
But we've
think,
also got to factor in if that's being done today currently.
Absolutely.
Right.
And it's got done well. and
It's,
quality.
that was my point.
Absolutely.
It's done well based on, like I said, the end game of how well are we as a district compared to other districts in the state or the county or the
Absolutely.
the country, right? And we're very successful. So, so we are spending that extra money now.
Absolutely.
So, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, we're getting the results,
Right.
a lot of the results that we want,
Yep.
so.
Well, and I will say that part of the thing, and I know that Jen's working on this with the survey and meeting with the other kindergarten providers and we have meetings all set and we've met with one, is to find out, you know, from the parents that are there now, the rationale that why do they go there? You know, is it this, is it that, is it the other? So it'll either validate our numbers, invalidate our numbers, or have you go another whole road. But this is the beginning. This is what we think would happen, just math. This was just math, Steve.
I think one thing to really reiterate is independent of the outcome, the conversation and the attention will be really valuable and time well spent, independent of what we decide to do for 1920.
All right. All right. Any other comments around this? All right. We'll move on to the voting section of the meeting. So before we have any votes, I'll open up the podium for any public comment on any voting agenda items. If you have any comment, come to the podium and please state your name and residency. And we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. All right, seeing none. First thing up is consent agenda items 701 through 7.20. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve 7.01 to 7.20.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any comments or question on any of these? All right, all those in favor? Motion passes 5-0. Next thing up is the personnel items. Do I have a motion for approval for 901?
Move to approve 9.01.
Second?
Motion and second. Any questions on these?
If I could just make one comment on there, you have 2 retirements on there, one Dale Garrison and another for Ann Rosoli. Dale is a very long, even longer than me, tenured employee here at Great Valley. She's been here since it was just mediocre Valley. And, since we were just a little hill. You know, she's going to be sorely missed, and we hope she enjoys her retirement. She's actually leaving right after the holidays. And then Ann Rosoli, who was our food service secretary, another longtime employee, 20-plus years, and one of the hearts and souls of that department. So I would be remiss without mentioning their names. I apologize, and I don't like them, so.
All right, no problem. And everybody will be missed that's retiring, so. Yep. All right, so I have a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? Motion passes 5-0. Next thing up is the policy. So we have the committee meeting report. I think you have an update for us, Samantha? In
Yes,
Steph's place.
I do. The committee met on November the 6th, so just last week. We reviewed several policies. Policy 621 is a local taxpayer bill of rights, and then the related administrative guidelines. This is an existing policy. No major changes were made to it. Some of the language was just updated by the lawyers who helped us with this, but no real material change. The second one is policy 624, which is taxable fringe benefits. We discussed this and it is listed, I think it's still listed under first reading, but we are going to postpone that and likely repeal it after discussion at the next meeting because that's included in the tax code and doesn't really need to be a policy of the school districts. Policy 710 is the use of facilities by staff. The guidelines for this policy were shortened, just to be more concise, and they state that staff must have administrative authorization for use of district facilities or equipment. In order to make this easier for people to locate if they wanted to look up something about this, or, the public or employees, we've changed the title of the policy moving forward, once we all adopt it as a board, so that instead of being just use of facilities, it will be called use of equipment and facilities by staff, since both are and have been referenced in it. Policy 711 is integrated pest management and the administrative guideline. This was also reviewed by the administration. Administrative guidelines were created. This will be updated regularly as laws change regarding pest and vegetation management. And this one, again, we wanted to update the title of it so that people could more easily find the information, since this incorporates not just pest management but also vegetation. So the title will be updated once we vote on it to integrated pest and vegetation management. Policy 713 is protection of property, and that's one that's up for repeal, as it, again, is something that falls under the confines of the law. Policy 713-1 was video surveillance. That was up for repeal, and we had discussion of this because it was up for repeal because there's another policy on transportation which includes video surveillance. The committee discussed this and recommended that we look at updating it rather than repealing it, since there's more video surveillance than just what's under transportation. So that's going to be updated and discussed in the next meeting, and will come before the board later. And to finish up, there was a policy 715 on the use of fax machines. We do recommend repealing that. We don't use a whole lot of fax machines these days, so no need to keep a policy on how to use them and who prints off the papers and who gets to carry them to the people who receive the faxes. Very interesting stuff there. Policy 718 was also discussed for a little bit. This one is service animals in school. Dr. Goffredo stated there's a designation between service animals and supporting animals, which is an important distinction. Service animals perform an actual function, whereas supporting animals are for comfort and are not permitted in the schools. So this policy is really about service animals. The policy states that the use of the animal must be substantiated. It must perform a task. This is dealt with on a case-by-case basis, and all the documentation and the animal training and all is vetted by the district before any animal is permitted in the school. So that will be up for us to vote on. And finally, policy 918 is Title I parent involvement. Dr. Goffredo told us that Title I is reminded us it's part of our federal programs. Title I designated schools receive additional funds, and children in those schools can qualify for various supports. He reported that the federal government has requirements about parent involvement, so each of our designated schools hold Title I nights, and so there's a description in that policy of how you involve parents and what you need to do for that. Those are all of our that was the discussions, and these will be up for reading beyond the ones that we've decided to either repeal or postpone for future. So we adjourned after that discussion. Thank you.
All right, thanks for the update. And I think most of those are under first reading or first reading appeal, so tonight, that was the first reading that's required. The second reading for adoption and second reading for appeal are up for actual vote tonight, so can I have a motion to approve 1004 and 1005?
Motion to approve.
Is she going to do it?
Nope.
I did say motion to approve both of these, 1004 and 1005.
All right.
Second?
Motion and second. Any question on all these? We went over them last meeting pretty well. All right, all those in favor? Motion passes 5-0. All right, 11?
If last week, Dr. O'Toole had presented the revised comprehensive plan, it has been on public review for 30 days. After your approval this evening, if you approve it this evening, we will be able to sign the comprehensive plan, and that will be submitted to PDE.
Move to approve 11.01.
Second.
Open up the public microphone for any public comments on any other subjects. Anybody wants to speak, please come to the podium, state your name and residency. All right, seeing none. Any other board comments?
Yes, I have two. First is concerning the policy section 10 on the agenda. So we give the committee report after we start calling the agenda. So I would like to maybe ask for consideration to give that committee report in the beginning of the meeting like we do the others, so that when the citizens can come up to speak on agenda items, they have already had that report, been the benefit of having heard that report. So if they want to comment on anything in the policy section, they can do that at the first citizens forum, right?
We can move it. It probably makes more sense to move it, but remember, the comments were all around first readings, which were not being voted on.
Correct, but we
Right.
did have 2 second readings, but what I'm saying is.
No, but the report she read was only based on first reading information.
Yeah, and this was unusual this month because the board meetings this is early. We actually, when we scheduled this board meeting last December, we kind of assumed that next week was parent conferences.
But she's right, it should be.
You're right.
We probably should have the committee
But
meeting.
normally, the policy would be at the work session, which
Right.
would be okay then, because
Yeah.
Okay, so if we could do that, I would be very grateful. I just want to make sure that everybody has a weighted opportunity. And then secondly, I attended yesterday on behalf of the board, the Great Valley alumni dedication of the Veterans Memorial. And I have to say that it was one of the most enjoyable afternoons I've spent since I have been on this board. So much work went into, I can't tell you how grateful we all should be that we have vessels like the Alumni Association, the foundation. We partnered with both of those organizations. There is a monument that is phenomenal. We're honoring 4 deceased Vietnam veterans who made the ultimate sacrifice. And the one thing that I carried away with me yesterday, first and foremost, was actually said by Dr. Speaker Polubinski, and she said, our freedom comes at a cost. And those 4 gentlemen, as well as every veteran, has paid that price for us. I am so grateful to those organizations that put together that monument, and to a grateful community, because if our community was not grateful, that would have never, ever happened yesterday. It was well attended, veterans from that era. I'm still crying about it. So thank you to everybody who helped with this. And like I said, to our grateful community, I appreciate it. That's it for me.
All right, any other comments? All right, motion to adjourn,
Move to adjourn.
second? All those in favor? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much for coming. Have a good evening.
Do I have your